Welcome to the Program Design Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Monique, teacher and curriculum writer turned program mentor and business strategist for coaches, educators, and online experts. Whether you're looking to create your first ever group coaching program or scale your current offer for more freedom, revenue, and consistent income, this is the podcast for you. Here you'll find practical strategies and encouragement mixed with a bit of manifestation and intuition to help you grow and design a program you absolutely love. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Program Design Podcast. In this episode, I want to show you how to price your program when you have always undercharged. So maybe this is you if you maybe come from a helping profession like therapy or teaching or massage therapy or some sort of supportive like health background, helping profession, and you know you're undercharging and you want to learn how to price your program. Or maybe you're not really sure if you're undercharging and you're struggling to kind of figure out how to price your program in a way that feels fair, in a way that feels right. It's hard to know how to price your program, or maybe people are telling you that you're underpricing, undercharging. So if any of that resonates with you, we are going to be diving into that in today's podcast episode. But before we do, I have a request to make. I got a fantastic email the other day from one of my podcast listeners saying that she left me a lovely review, which is always fantastic. And I don't always see them actually because I'm in Canada. I see Canadian reviews most of the time. I don't always see my other reviews from other countries. So I was just so grateful for her to say that. And I thought, you know what? I am going to actually ask at the beginning of this episode if you have been finding these episodes helpful, if you've appreciated the podcast in any way. I would love it if you left me a review on the podcast app of your choice. It means so much to me. I really, really appreciate it. And of course, it helps grow the podcast too. So if you're up for that, if it's been helpful for you, I would love it if you left me a review. And let's get to this week's episode. So let's chat about undercharging. And I remember the first time I kind of came up against this was 8 years ago. And I remember sitting in my last house. We lived in the city in a much smaller house than we do now. And I remember sitting on my couch and I had just put my son to bed. So I was being really quiet. I didn't want him to wake up. He was only about a year and a bit at the time, maybe a year and a half. So the house was quiet and I was so excited because I was about to jump on a group coaching call, one of my first group coaching calls ever. So I had just joined a course, and in that course, I joined from an affiliate and I was able to do some small group coaching with another mentor, another business coach. So she was an affiliate and she gave away some coaching as part of her affiliate package. And I was so excited because I was about to jump on my second ever group coaching call with her and the other new business owners in the room. I was so excited. I was quite nervous and I wasn't really sure what to expect. And when it was my time to ask my question, I remember feeling like these nerves in my stomach, and I felt uncomfortable even sharing because I felt like everyone else was more advanced than me in the room and further along. And I shared about this product that I was selling and I wanted some thoughts on how to sell it and market it. And I started sharing about what it was. And at the time, I was a curriculum writer and I wrote curriculum. I created curriculum for teachers, specifically for French immersion teachers. And at the time, I had created a product that was like a done for you digital product. And it was called, they're called bell ringers in English. And basically what they are is short activities to have students come in when they come in from in high school. When the bell rings, there's an activity waiting for them. So when they come into class, they see what's on the board and they have something to do right away. So the teacher can kind of get organized, get settled, situated for the morning. The other reason that it was really helpful was because these were really in-depth bell ringers that I had created. And they touched on every single, like speaking, reading, writing, grammar, and listening. There you go. So they were quite in depth. They touched on each piece of those, which is really important to French teachers. And so it was like already done for you, already created, really engaging.
And it was for the entire year. It took me hours and hours and hours and hours to create this freaking resource. And I was sharing about it and I was thinking about how I wanted to sell more of them. And they asked me, okay, great. How much is it? And I said, it's $30. And everyone in the room, like their jaw hit the floor. Everyone in the room was like, what? You are charging $30 for this and it goes for the entire year? Like, I don't even remember how. I think I made like 52 weeks, which is even more than they would need. I don't know. I had weeks and weeks and weeks of this theme based. It took me hours and hours and hours to create this resource. And they started asking me things like, well, how many hours is it going to save someone for them to actually create this? I'm like, well, hours and hours and hours. How much time is it going to save them? How much stress are they going to feel lifted off their shoulders? How important is it for them to be able to like touch on all of those 5 elements? Can they use it in other ways? I was like, yeah, they could use it as like an entire, like if they're sick one day, they could use another week for like a whole lesson plan. There's so many uses for it. And everyone basically looked at me like I was crazy for charging $30 for this resource. And I felt so uncomfortable charging more because that was industry standard. Everyone was kind of charging that amount in my industry, but people outside of the teaching industry looked at me like I was crazy, was saving people so much time. And they were like, you are undercharging for this product. You need to charge more for this product. And I was very uncomfortable with that idea, but I did. I think I more than doubled it. Over time, it went up to $80, and then it became part of a bigger product that had some other elements that helped teachers with their whole year. So it became part of like a $200 product as part of my toolkit. Anyway, that product went on to make me over time $40,000. And I made it once. I've hardly marketed it since. I did market it back in those days, but I've hardly marketed it since. And passively, over time, it's made me $40,000. And that was probably like really when I was growing my teacher curriculum business. So $40,000 now, would I be happy with a product that maybe $40,000? Maybe I'd want to make more. But at the time when I was thinking, oh my gosh, I just want to make, I think when I first started, I wanted to make $500 a month. That was really sizable for me. And it was one of those first experiences that I realized that my background, my lens might lend itself to undercharging. And so that's what I want to dive in today. And I am so grateful that those lovely other business owners looked at me like I was crazy and told me to raise my prices. And that has been an ongoing theme for me in many business circles. And so if you're listening to this episode, my guess is you can probably relate to either people telling you that you're undercharging and need to raise your rates, or maybe feeling like maybe this isn't quite right, or maybe no one has told you that you're undercharging, but you start to feel resentful over the amount that people are paying you. That is another indicator that you might be undercharging. So in this episode, I want to dive into how to know if you are undercharging, why you're doing it, where it comes from, and then how to think about pricing your program from an energetic standpoint, from a strategic one, so you can price your program in a way that feels like that energetic match that is no longer underpricing or is the right price for you. So the first thing to think about is, are you undercharging in the first place? Are you undercharging in the first place? And the first thing I'll say to that is, pricing is relative. There's no critic-proof price. I have had people tell me in the same day, why is your program so cheap? What's the catch? And someone else say, that is too expensive. And so we can't price our programs in a way that everyone agrees with. There will always be someone who thinks it's too cheap and too expensive. So the first thing I share is that it needs to be an energetic match for you. So there's no one way that everyone's going to agree that you're undercharging. What I will say though, there are some signs that you might be undercharging. So the first telltale sign is if you feel resentful. So I've absolutely been here when I've mentored, especially around teachers in the past, that I feel like I've put in so much effort, energy, and I'm feeling spread thin because I'm putting so much in and I'm not getting enough back. Or I'm putting so much effort and I'm working so hard to try and get my clients results, and they are just not putting the same effort back in. And it's like pulling teeth. Those might be indicators that you are undercharging because your energetic balance is off and you end up feeling resentful because you're doing too much or too little in return. So that's the first kind of sign that you might be undercharging is if you feel resentful, it might be time to raise your prices. The other one is to look at market value and see, are you way below market value? Like sometimes people will look around and see what are their competitors charging and then just charge a little bit under because they feel like their work isn't good enough yet. And so you might be undercharging based on your market. The last piece, though, to look at is your industry as a whole undercharging, which is kind of a difficult one to notice when you're like swimming in it. But when I started my business 8 years ago, I was a curriculum writer and I created curriculum and I sold it on different platforms for teachers. One of the most well-known ones that I sold it on, I still sell it on to this day, is called Teachers Pay Teachers. And I didn't know it at the time, but that platform, I mean, my gosh, things are so cheap there. You need to have massive volume to do well. There are absolutely sellers who make 7 figures on there, but they have massive volume, tons of products, tons of people buying them. It is definitely not the market for me. It's not the industry for me, but their products by and large are very low price. They might be $3, $10. Some of them, I mean, like mine went up to like $80, $200. But honestly, when I raised my rates, when I raised my product price to $80, it was very high for my industry. So sometimes it's hard to know when you're in that industry that it's a thing in your industry that everyone undercharges. And that usually comes from an industry held money block. So that one can be a little bit trickier to kind of perceive. But if you can see that everyone in your industry is not being paid well, that might be an indicator. First, I want to point out why you might be undercharging if you resonate with any of that. The first reason that you might be undercharging is you might have a thought of, I want to be affordable. I want to be affordable so that I can help other people. And I absolutely understand this. You want to be able to support as many people as possible because you know your work is really, really supportive for them. However, when we focus on making our products affordable, by and large in our industry, that can really affect us. If you are running a nonprofit, like I used to work in a nonprofit, we got funding from donors. And so that's where our funding came from. And so our work was affordable or free because we had other revenue sources. But if you are in business, you need to be able to make money to sustain the business. And oftentimes when you make something affordable, it comes at your own expense and you cannot keep going in the business to actually make that product happen. So what I would much rather do now is offer products that aren't necessarily affordable, but that are well priced, that I feel aligned with the pricing, and give from overflow. So I make money in the business now so that now I can produce things like this podcast that is free for you to consume. And so I can create other affordable free resources because I come from overflow. But when I was so focused on helping other people and making sure my stuff was affordable, that came at my own expense. And honestly, it can leave us truly in poverty, in making very little money for the amount that we're the effort that we're putting in. So that's the first thing to think about is it can come from a place of, I want to make this affordable. The next might be that you feel responsible for other people's money. And this was a really big one for me. If ever you think about over functioning, if you ever feel responsible for other people's money, so you might think, oh my gosh, what if they can't afford this? Maybe this is too expensive. You are taking on responsibility for their revenue and how much they can afford or their income, when really it's none of your business. You have no idea how much money they make, what they can afford. And really, you cannot decide what someone can or cannot afford. And so oftentimes undercharging comes from a place of, I want to be affordable for someone else. And it can be when we're taking up too much responsibility for how much money they have. And instead, we want to say, this is how much my price is, and people can decide to pay it or not. Like, I'm not deciding for someone if they can afford it or not. Like, that is their adults joining my program. They can decide if they can afford it. So we need to let go of that feeling of feeling responsible for other people. And then the last reason that this could come up for you is you might have a deeply ingrained belief that you can either help people or make money, but you can't do both. that you can either help people or make money, but you can't do both. And this was one that I held very, very deeply. If you come from a helping profession, can feel really, really true for you, that if you really, really cared, you'd do it for free. Or if you really cared about other people, you wouldn't really be charging. Like, how can you possibly charge for helping others? And what I have seen that is so amazing in the work that we do as mentors, as coaches, is that you can help other people and you can make money for it, because people who pay attention. The ones who get the best results in your programs, when you think about it, I know for me this is true, and I'm guessing it's true for you too. The people who get the best results are the ones who've actually committed and put the money down and said, this is what I'm going to do. They're the ones who are invested, and they're the ones who get the best results. I have offered things for free and people do not take action on them. When you think about your testimonials, when you look at my testimonials, I mean, I might get the odd one that people can get from my podcast, but the ones who really have a transformational experience from my coaching have paid. So I help them and I make money from it. You can do both. And we need to start to let go of that feeling of like, if I really cared, I'd be doing it for free. So that is often why we're undercharging. Now, there may be other defining reasons, but those are big ones that come up for people, right? So let's talk about how to actually price your program. I want to come from two standpoints, because when I first started learning about pricing my program, I heard a lot about like marketing, the market, what would be the right price for the market, like a really strategic, profitable pricing. I heard a lot about like the profitable, strategic, like left brain way of seeing pricing. But I like to blend both. So I look at the strategy, the more like logical way of pricing, but I also like to think of it in a more feminine, energetic way as well, so that you feel aligned with your price. So the first strategy that I'm going to help you price your program at is a more energetic, feminine energy way. And then I'll share some more tangible, tactical strategies to help you. So when I look at pricing my programs, the first thing I like to do is think about, is this an energetic match for me, and really tap into my intuition. So what I like to do, and I run, if you've ever come to one of my trainings, I often run this in my master classes, the same exercise. And what you want to do is you want to ground yourself in the present moment, calm yourself, ground yourself. And I'm not going to take you through it in this episode today, because my guess is, you're listening to it on the go. Maybe you're driving, you're doing the dishes or something like that. Maybe you're with your kids. If you do want to actually do it with me live, do send me a DM. And if I've got a training coming up, I'll let you know when the next one is, so you can come and do it with me live. But I'll kind of walk you through it now. So you want to kind of ground and calm yourself, center yourself. And then you want to start to just think of different price points and going up and up and up. Like when I do it, I'll start at like $100, go all the way up to $15,000. Think about different price points and just notice what comes up for you if you lean into your intuition. Like I know for me, I'm really about how I feel in my body to listen into my intuition. That might not be your main way of tapping into your intuition, but if you can, just think about those different price points and see what comes up for you when you think of those different price points. And you can kind of come to like a good medium. So I even think about this when I'm starting to price my programs and I have an idea of what my program's going to be. Then I think about, I'll just go up and up and up until I hit a point where I'm like, that actually feels good. It honestly feels a little bit like Goldilocks. Is that the story? I think so, right? Where you try different things until you feel the right one. And I kind of reach for this point where I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel heavy. That doesn't feel yucky to say, but it doesn't feel like too much of a stretch and way too overdone for me. It feels like this good, like maybe a slight stretch, but this happy medium. That can feel like a good energetic place to start with. And you can always raise your prices from there. And again, if you want to do this exercise with me, come to my next training. Send me a DM on Instagram. I'm lauramonique.business, and I'll let you know the next one that we're doing. And so you can kind of see this in real time. So getting a sense, listening into your body, what feels like not resentful, but not too much of a stretch, like that happy medium for you that might feel like a little bit outside your comfort zone, but not wildly. So that's the first way to think about it from an energetic standpoint. You can also think about it from a more strategic standpoint as well, which I would recommend. So the first thing to look at is to think about your industry a little bit. Like I think about it like when you go to sell your house, right? We look at what are other homes that are like comparables in your market. What are they going for? That can give you a sense of what is happening in your industry and give you a sense of where you want to be in the industry. And you'll also probably see that there's quite a range. Like, for example, in the parenting coaching industry, I've heard of group coaching programs that are like $97. Well, those are more courses, say $97 courses and low ticket memberships, all the way up to like a $3,000 program for group parent coaching. So there's quite a range. And when you know that range, you can say, well, okay, then if that's like what different people are charging their program for, I can get a sense of where I want to be. The thing I would caution you against is you don't want to be the cheapest in your industry, because even your price says something about how you position your offer. If you price it cheaply, that can say, I am not confident in the results that I get for people. People might think she can't be that great because hers are not very expensive. That's something to think about, pricing psychology, right? So you want to price it at a point where people are like, oh, I can see the value in this. And you can use like market comparables to think about where you want your price to be. Whenever I'm thinking about raising my price or what my price might be, I do think about, okay, well, how much have I spent on this before? And where do I want to be in that realm? That can really help you from a logical standpoint. The other thing to think about is your EPL, your earnings per lead. So I'm going to get into some math here, but this one's really helpful to think about because your earnings per lead, if ever, which I would recommend, you go to Facebook ads one day, you need to make sure that your earnings per lead is more than you spend on your leads. So here's what I mean by that. Your earnings per lead is how much, if you do some sort of launch sales strategy, the number of people you had in your launch, and you're figuring out how much you earned per person. Say you make $100 and you had 10 people in your launch, your earnings per lead would be 100 divided by 10. That would be $10 a lead, right? What we need to have an idea of is if you do use ads one day, or if you are using ads, we need to make sure our EPL is more than your cost per lead. So if your cost per lead is $10 and you make $10 earnings per lead, then you're just breaking even. It might be an indicator that you need to raise your prices because you're not profitable. If you notice that you're like, if you're in an industry that is not like mine in business coaching, and you're more in like parenting, relationship space, things like that, you might have like $2 per lead. And then, so $2 per lead, you make for every person that comes into your launch, your sales system, you make $10 per lead. Well, then it's like you have $80 that you're making profit. Well, then that makes sense. And maybe your pricing is more profitable. So you want to think about how much does it cost for you to acquire a customer? And is that still profitable for you? And if you do have questions on this, you can send me a DM because I haven't really spoken a lot about this on the podcast. So do let me know. But we want to think about, like, if you're just breaking even or you're just making a little bit more than you spent on your ads, it may be that your product is too cheap for it to be profitable. So you want to make sure when you think about everything that you're spending on your platform, any subscriptions that you have, if you have a VA, all of those things come into the cost to run your business. You need to make sure that you're still profitable on top of it. So that is something else to think about when you are pricing your program. So I'm not going to give you an exact way to price your program, but I do want to give you some of those strategies to start thinking about how to actually price it and stop undercharging. If this resonated with you and you want help to not only price your program in a way that is profitable, that we feel is aligned for you, that's not undercharging, but you also want to be able to grow your program, you want to be able to have more freedom in your week, you want to be able to really grow it and make more money from it too, and you would like my support, you can send me a message on Instagram with the word waitlist, and I will let you know as soon as we do our next intake for signature program design. I would love to support you. So let's recap what we talked about in this week's episode. So the first thing we talked about is my experience with undercharging. It is still something that comes up on a regular basis that I need to check in with. Am I undercharging? Is it time to raise my rates? That is something to think about. Then we talked about how to know if you're undercharging, if you're feeling resentful, if you're priced below market value, and why you might be doing it, where this might be coming from. Is it an industry norm? Is it a belief that you have ingrained from different experiences in your life. And then we chatted about how to actually price your program from an energetic standpoint, going up from say like 100, 250, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, and just sitting with it and seeing what feels like an energetic match for you. And then also thinking about it from a more strategic standpoint, thinking about your earnings per lead. Is it a profitable pricing strategy? And what is your pricing strategy relative to your market? Because we want to be on the upper end. And that is part of like that profitable pricing. The last thing that I'll leave you with when you think about what you want to let go of when you're undercharging, the other thing that I think is really important is when you undercharge, it also lets us feel safe. That we can say, well, it's not very expensive. So if someone doesn't get a result or someone does this, like, it's okay because it's not very expensive. But when you charge more, you're like, I need to make sure that this is worth more than the amount that they're spending. And so you up your game too. So I would recommend, as someone who is a past undercharger and someone who still has to think about it on a regular basis, think about how you could let that go and start to price your program more profitably for you, because it will up level the results and the experience that you're creating for someone. And also it will make it more sustainable for you over time. Again, if this is something that you want support with, reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you, and I can share a little bit more about the programs and put you on the wait list for Signature Program Design, the programs that I help people design and grow their programs. My program, sorry, I have two. And the other thing is, if you found this episode helpful, again, like I said at the beginning, if you could leave me a review on your podcast app of choice, I would be so, so grateful. I would love it if you did. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you on next week's episode of the Program Design Podcast.